right, so I'm here with Chief Master Sergeant Kevin Norman.
Retired.
Retired, yeah. Congratulations on that. So, full disclosure, me and Kevin go, man, way back to how long ago was it? 2000.
About 20 years.
Yeah, almost 20 years, man. So, time sort of flies by.
Yeah.
So we were young airmen. You were a staff sergeant back then, I think. So.
Angry
Staff sergeant, yeah. I think we all had our issues, So we run into each other, 15 years, 20 years later. We got to talking the other day, and you were telling me your story, and I wanted to put it on here. So you made chief. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Most people assume you made chief. That must have been an easy road. You must have had it laid out for you. You vaulted right to the top, and here you are at the top of the food chain. So how true is that?
Not true at all.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is, if you want to do that, you have to do a lot of things that nobody wants to do, even you. And you kind of got to listen to people. If you actually listen, take advice, learn, shut up, and take responsibility. A lot of people want the title, like the parking space.
Yeah,
parking space is nice. Paycheck's good. A lot of people want the title, want the paycheck, but don't want the responsibility for being or the risk of being wrong. I've seen people defer decisions because there's a risk associated with it, and they would rather be able to point out that somebody else was wrong rather than they made a wrong decision.
Yeah. I got out along. Not at 11 years. So that was in 2000 it was 08, I think. I got out. So I got out kind of at the end, and I noticed there was starting to sort of be that shift in the leadership style of the military. They kind of changed. So
the Air Force did some things. I love me some Air Force. I will always be blue, always, always, always. But I think the leadership model in the Air Force is flawed. I think it's flawed for commissioned officers. One thing I like about the Army and Marine Corps is their officers actually work shoulder to shoulder with their enlisted people. And I think that they learn a lot that way. There's an opportunity to teach them lessons born through the experience of the enlisted man or woman. The Air Force doesn't do that, and I think that that's wrong. Because the model for the commissioned officer is the way it is, I think it has bled into some of the enlisted promotion system. And the Air Force does a pretty good job at weeding those people out, but truthfully, some get by.
Yeah.
I know one guy that shall remain nameless. He made chief, and he would never, ever take somebody's back if there was a chance that he could be exposed to being.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah, it was. That's there were some great leaders that I had in the military, and people that I look up to and respect to this day. That I look back on, and there was some bad ones.
Now sometimes,
to remain nameless, but I'm sure you remember a few of the ones I'm talking about.
But sometimes, man, it's important to know what not to be, though.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's more important than knowing what you want to be.
Yeah.
What you want to be will evolve. I actually tell young people all the time, what's important for you today will not be important in 5 years or 10 years. But if you know what you don't want to be, that should never change.
Yeah, that's true. It's well put. So you said you were an angry staff sergeant. So what angry about what? What had you angry?
Yeah, I had a lot of misplaced anger when I was younger. I had a rough childhood, never met my biological father. My mother was an alcoholic, multiple marriages. Looking back now, I never went and saw a psychiatrist or psychologist, but I'm sure I had abandonment issues. And truthfully, what a lot of people don't know is like in high school, I was actually very afraid. And when I joined the Air Force, The Air Force gave me a vehicle to become what I was going to become. And I think when that happened, I gained so much confidence, and I kind of put up a wall that I didn't want anything intruding in that. For the first time in my life, I knew what I was. I was good at what I did. I knew my role. I knew where I was supposed to be. And I was determined to be that person, you know. And so I always say I only turned down one TDY my entire career. It's because my wife was having surgery. And one particular mass sergeant that you do know still tried to send me on that day. And I didn't go. But I viewed things as you were either helping my airplane fly or you're helping keep it on the ground. And if you weren't helping it fly, I had no use for you.
Yeah.
And I didn't suffer lazy people very much at all. I had no concept of what real leadership was. And so...
But it doesn't sound like you had much of an example before
So
the Air Force, like when you talk about kind of your family history, like.
So my dad ended up adopting me when I was 14. But my issues were more born out of my little brother's father, who was the first person that I called dad. And then after him and my mom divorced, at first he did things with us, and then it became less and less. But to him, to me at the time, he was still my father.
Yeah.
And I didn't fully understand it. But we all know how that kind of abandonment affects kids.
Sure.
And it affects us as young adults too. And I don't have any of that anger anymore.
When I adopted at 14, like you're right in the heart of like these concreted in issues going into a new life.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons.
It's difficult to build that new relationship when you're carrying all that with you.
So me and my dad actually became incredibly close later on in life.
Yeah.
And actually, after I had my own kids, I came to appreciate what he did, because I feel like I had a better father than the biological process would have provided.
Yeah.
He was an awesome man. And actually, when I actually became a man instead of just a young adult, a lot of my decisions after my father passed away, I still would think about what would Dad do, what would he say right now. And so he was incredibly influential.
Yeah. So how did so after that you jumped in the Air Force and you had it sounded like it was a good thing for you joining, or at least you had the mentality of going in like, this is what I need. This is
man,
I didn't
know how to do shit.
Here I go. I mean, I can say it was instrumental in my life. I learned a lot the hard way. I made a lot of mistakes. You're right beside me for a couple of them. So you mentioned being kind of an angry staff sergeant when I mentioned it a minute ago, right? So how did that transition? It sound like you joined. You start off on this like optimistic, here I go, I'm about to go take the world by the tail.
Well, whenever I joined in 1990, and we still had a lot of guys that were Vietnam era.
Mm-hmm.
And the mantra is still there, but it really was work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
There was, just being truthful, if you're on the road, how much you could drink the night before and still perform your job actually mattered.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right, but it actually mattered. And
I've had that conversation in here before too, just certain circles, the military by far I think is number one, but that how much of everything revolves around like alcohol. It's like, hey, you want to go play putt-putt? No, but let's get drunk and go play putt-putt. Like, hey, you want to do? It's always like, let's drink and then do this.
Yeah.
Every social, everything.
I think especially aircraft maintenance, is such a testosterone heavy field. And so when you get all these men together, there's always a constant proving of yourself. And I think that was just an avenue to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Because it really was. You remember how it was, man. It wasn't just alcohol. We were verbally and emotionally and sometimes physically abusive to each other.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't take it, you were an outcast.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Very true.
And they were probably much better people than we were.
Yeah, there was a lot of good people, man. I remember, man, I can't even remember the kid's name, but I remember TDY in Washington and him getting picked on, and he was brand new, and him just being I found him like later at night at the hotel, and he was just in tears.
Yeah.
You know, I had to go to his room and talk to him, be like, tried to like, man, you gotta, don't let him see you this way. You know, I don't know what happened to him. I think I PCS shortly after, so
Yeah.
I hope he turned it around, but.
That would have been blood in the water.
Good kid, though, you look back on it now, it's like, the wisdom of maturing a little bit, and I guess growing up.
It's still like that a little bit. It's not nearly as bad as it was.
Yeah, I wondered how the PC culture of today affected.
It's changed a whole lot. It really, really has. Some good, some bad. I personally think that there is a place for that tough mentality.
Yeah. When you think about it, like the military has a purpose, and it's not to be nice and kind, and when the military is called upon, it's to go fight. Like that's the quintessential military purpose.
Yeah, the danger is that you shut down initiative before it ever gets started.
Sure.
Somebody might have good ideas, and I've seen this happen. Somebody has good ideas, and they're afraid to voice it, and the idea never comes to light, and it could be an incredible idea. And also because the population of the military is so much smaller than it is now.
Yeah.
Each individual person has a greater percentage of impact on the mission. And so you don't have the luxury of being able to disregard someone. If you're gonna separate somebody, it needs to be because they can't do the job.
Yeah.
Not because the unit didn't accept that person. And as an example of goodness, in my last unit, we had this young man who really traumatic childhood stuff. Just before he got to our base, his father jumped off the building, killed himself. After it came to light that his father was sexually abusing his sister. This young man had definitely was challenged when it came to social dynamics, but and he was weird. I mean, there's just whatever technical term that is, he was just weird. But what was awesome was my unit. The guys in my unit embraced him as their weird guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was weird. They would tell him he was weird.
We can pick on our weird guy, but you won't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and he knew that.
Yeah.
And so he was an accepted part of the unit, and he dug it, and they liked him, and it worked. Mm. And really, those are the kind of things that we could have done better whenever we were younger. That's where I think we kind of got it wrong a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird looking back. I talked to a lot of people. I'm sure you did as you made it up to chief, and you start to counsel. You start to hear stories like that, when you get to a level when people confide in you, and you look back on when we were 22, 23, and all these. I oftentimes wonder, like, man, what was going on in this person's life? Or, people you look back on that didn't make it or that struggled in that environment, and now I feel sometimes guilty. You're like, man, like, had I known then, could I have been something in that person's life? What were they dealing with? Where did they come from? What was their real?
So what started to change me, I kid you not, this is 100% true. I've told this story to people a bunch of times. So I'm at Shepherd. For those that might listen, Shepherd is where we go to teach aircraft maintenance. So I'm an instructor at Shepherd, and back then we had 7-level school. And some guys from Grand Forks were down there for 7-level school, and I invited them over. We weren't supposed to, but I didn't really care. So, sitting in my living room watching football, drinking beer, and Fat Donnie was one of the guys. And I made a comment that I was hard but fair, and that's why people like to work with me. And I look over, and he's got his head down like this, and I see his shoulders shaking. So I know he's laughing, and I says, "What the hell are you laughing at?" And he looks up, "We're at my house," right? He goes, "Norm, you were an asshole." And I was kind of taken back, you know. And he goes, "Man, you had reasons." He goes, I don't mean to make it sound terrible." He goes, "Man, you were an asshole." And I tried to play it off like it didn't bother me. But obviously, all these years later, I still remember that conversation. Yeah. And it struck me how I did not see myself that way. But so many other people did.
Yeah.
And so, was I lying to myself? Was I lying to myself because I chose not to see, because it made me feel better about being me? Or was I too lazy to put in the work to actually be a good leader? That specific conversation was the first time that I decided I needed to be a leader.
That's a tough change, man. Like, you can't just leave work as an asshole on Friday and show up on Monday and you're like good leader. Like, you can't. It's sometimes it's really difficult to turn that around, and the same people are around.
Yeah.
You know, and well, really, and with you too, like with Donnie, with, you know, I was there at the same time. A lot of people around, like a lot of us had been with you through those first years when, you know, I mean, we made a lot of stupid decisions and did a lot of dumb stuff. That's a hard thing to do when a lot of people know you're.
Yeah.
It's hard to go to somebody and be like, "Hey, man, I would like to, I want to challenge you to be better." And you're like, "Man, I was there when you were." You're like, "Talk to me about that." You know?
Yeah.
So how did you navigate that?
To be honest with you, I thought about it a whole lot.
Yeah.
Donnie had that conversation with me, and at the same time, I had this supervisor named Robert Reich. And we had this one guy who was former Army. And he joined the Air Force because he thought he could join the Air Force, go into aircraft maintenance, and it would like help him become a pilot. And so he did like 2 years on the KC-10 and then came to the schoolhouse to teach. And I thought this guy was just fake, and didn't like aircraft maintenance. So me and Bob Wright were sitting out at the smoke pit before work. I see this guy walking by, and I says, "I can't stand that son of a bitch." And he starts laughing, and he's like, "Why?" I said, "He don't even want to be a crew chief. He doesn't even want to be aircraft maintenance." And he's rolling, and he says, "Just because they don't want to do that doesn't make them a bad person." And that sounds like such a simple statement now, but I literally judged everybody that way.
Yeah.
So when you combine what Donnie said with what Rob Reich said, it made me consider who I actually was.
Yeah.
And my job as a technical instructor was to teach these airmen how to work on an airplane. And it wasn't to teach them to be me. It was to give them the knowledge so that they could succeed. And not everybody responds to being yelled at and having F-bombs hurled at them.
Yeah.
And so I realized that I needed to change if I was going to do my job as well as I needed to do my job. And that was the first time I started changing my communication style and started looking at how do you actually impact people.
It's humbling to go through that realization of, like, you know, one, I've been sucking. You know, here's where I've been failing, and let me write it down and detail it. Here's a list of everything I'm terrible at. But then to turn around and actually make strides to try to correct it, you know, that's a.
Well, you know, we used to say on the flat line all the time, right? Don't suck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not don't suck at only these things. It's don't suck.
In general, yeah.
And I was an instructor. How am I going to be a really good instructor if I can't communicate effectively?
Yeah.
So, yeah, decided I need to make some.
So that kind of turned it around for you. It sounds like, you know, career-wise and in your personal life, just the way you were living, you know, which obviously, you know, we're sitting here calling you Chief Norman. So obviously your career turned around for the better.
It did, man. I was so fortunate. I had so many people influence me, even at times whenever maybe I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
I always figured out.
Man, that was man, my whole story about the Air Force was, one person after another. Some of them I reached out to in the last few years to be like, man, you didn't know this is what I was going through at the time, or this was kind of this dark place I was in, and some of the decisions I made. But people that went to bat for me, or were just mentors for no reason I can think of.
What's funny is you don't even realize sometimes when people were mentors until much further down the road.
Oh yeah, some of them were pretty rough too. You look back, and in fact, one of them even apologized to me. Was like, man, he's since made a lot of changes, and he's cleaned up a lot, and he was a rough guy back then. I'll tell you who it was after I stopped, but and he was like, he was kind of apologized, man. How did I know? Like, I wish I could have been more. Like, that wasn't what I needed then. If you'd have been this guy back then, I would have made fun of you. Like who you were back then was who I needed. So.
Yeah, whenever I made chief, one of the things I did was I reached out to all the people that I could that had really affected me. One guy was Al Barsky.
Yeah,
and for those listening, Al had a reputation of being an ass, but it really was because he knew his job. He was really smart, and he held people to a standard, and we kind of viewed that as being better than us in some way. But the truth of the matter is, Al motivated me to be better, but I didn't realize it.
Didn't realize it at the
time. And so I actually, when I made chief, I sent him a Facebook message telling him thank you for making me better. It's funny how we sometimes we need time to be able to realize that people are really good for us, even at times that we don't think they are.
What's a lesson you can take too? You talk about leadership as sometimes being a good leader for somebody or being something that they need doesn't mean they'll like you. And that's okay.
Yeah, I used to tell my senior NCOs all the time, be the leader they need, not the leader you want to be.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we get that wrong. The leader they need will be effective 100% of the time. The leader you want to be won't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like being a parent, really. Like if you're your kid's best friend, like that isn't always the best thing. Like, I think leadership's kind of the same way. So you put on chief, so you and I kind of had a chance to catch up the other day and talked. We haven't talked in years and stuff, and you shared with me with some of the harder times that you had a little bit later in life.
Yeah, so I made chief in 2015, and that same year, my wife, Judy, got diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. Ovarian cancer is a very aggressive cancer. When she got diagnosed, it was absolutely devastating. So for those, that might be listening, you spend your entire military career visualizing after your career. Conversations all the time
when
about
I retire,
when I get out, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And so Judy and I were high school sweethearts, and we met when we were 16, and got married whenever I was 18 and she was 17. And so when she got diagnosed with cancer, that was the first time that I really thought all those things I visualized may not happen. I remember getting home from the doctor, walking in the door, and I just hit my knees and I bawled my eyes out. And she did too, and all these fears, came to the surface. And so I dedicated myself to helping her get better. I brought the kids together. Our kids were a little bit older. Brought the kids together and said, look, around mom, it's all positive. You can't be positive, you're not going to be around mom. She needs positivity.
Yeah.
And so I can say I went to 100% of her doctor appointments. She never went anywhere. I can legitimately say that I did absolutely everything that I could to make sure that she would get better. So she underwent chemotherapy, aggressive chemotherapy, lost her hair and all the things that go along with that. And she went in remission. Remission lasted 6 weeks.
Wow.
So there was like this huge high.
Man, high and low.
I got her a big cake and everything. We had this big celebration. The chemo nurses were awesome.
Mm.
And then 6 weeks later, her numbers went back up.
Man.
And so long story short, Judy passed away May 24th of 2018. And I held her hand whenever she died. And so it was a 3-year battle, and she was on chemotherapy of some sort for basically the entire time.
3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying different drugs and everything.
Yeah.
So, what you don't say whenever you're going through that process.
So this is 2018. So were you were senior, or were you chief at this time?
No, I was a chief.
So you were not only carrying the burden of all that at home, but then you go to work and you were the chief.
Yep.
And everyone comes to you. I end up, at the counseling center, we talked about that. A lot of people I see, for whatever reason, I've fallen into kind of a niche where I've had a lot of pastors and athletes and cops and like this demographic of people that just, everybody in your life, all your relationships, you're giving to. Like, so you were kind of in that same one, really. Like, you're at home, you're the caretaker. You go to work, you're the chief. You're...
Well, and then when you're in positions of leadership, your peer group is small.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have people to have conversations with.
And you're supposed to be tough and the leader and the go-to guy. And
Yeah. I'm fortunate. I had amazing airmen. I can honestly say that my airmen helped me get through that period. I'm incredibly grateful for them. My leadership was really good. They never, not one time did anybody ever say a negative word. If I had to leave work because Judy had a doctor's appointment, or she was having a super bad day and I needed to stay home and take care of her, never a bad word. So I was very fortunate in that regard. But what I was saying earlier is that whenever you have a process like that, you do think about what if they die.
Yeah.
And you kind of know it's eventually going to happen. And so you visualize things. I've actually written some on this, but I remember thinking to myself, well, I'll be able to decide what I want for dinner.
Silver linings.
Women can never decide what they want for dinner. No arguing over the radio station in the car, dumb stuff, right?
Yeah.
But these thoughts come into your head. And so I remember whenever she looked at me and she was having a lot of pain. And she said, honey, I can't take it anymore. We need to go in. And so that was her way of saying to go into hospice care. And I said, okay. And I packed her stuff. Didn't really hit me. That was the last time I would ever pack anything for her. And so we went to hospice care. And so like I said, I thought I had mentally prepared myself for all these things. And the moment she died, and I remember it like it was yesterday, the moment she died, I immediately knew I was not ready. I immediately knew. I mean, I yelled, cried. Then I had to call my kids and tell them to come up to the hospital because it was really early in the morning. And and it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It was the worst thing. My father passed away in 2000, and I was really close to my dad. And the comparison, it's not even remotely close.
Yeah.
Because you start to realize that everything you had visualized, everything you had planned, your whole vision of your future was never going to happen. And it's overwhelming. And then as a person in a position of leadership, you feel like you have to have some manner of control. And this is something I had no control over.
Yeah.
and then because I was so grief stricken, I couldn't control my emotions, and then my kids were grown. I was getting close to retirement. So I lost my wife. I was losing my career because I was going to be retiring soon. My children were grown, so they didn't really need me. And I had no idea what to do with myself. I was utterly, completely lost.
All of your like husband, dad, cheat, like all of your identities are all of a sudden just vanishing.
I actually thought about selling the house, applying for early retirement because I didn't have the time in for the stripe yet. But applying for early retirement, and I actually contemplated hiking the Pacific Coast Trail and just disappearing. But I didn't do it because I had kids.
Yeah. So what did you do? So what got you? We're sitting here having this conversation. So, what turned around from that day to now?
Well, it is a process. There's no magic pill. For one, and I tell this to people, that if they ever are struggling with something in their life to where they just don't know what to do, I think you have to make some time for yourself. It occurred to me that I had no memories that were of me. All my memories were either Air Force related or were with Judy. And so I decided to take some leave, and I was going to take a trip. And I originally didn't want to plan ahead at all, but lodging made that kind of difficult. So my compromise was that I would only plan 2 days in advance.
Okay.
So every day I would wake up and decide where I wanted to be 2 days from now. And so I ended up going from Albuquerque, New Mexico, to Pagosa Springs, Colorado, to Durango, Colorado, to Steamboat Springs, Colorado. I went up to Lander, Wyoming.
You just driving across the...
Yeah. I ended up going to Grand Tetons, visiting there. Lander, Wyoming, and then there's another town in Wyoming. I can't think of it right now. To another town in Wyoming, and then went up to Montana, went to Glacier National Park, drove across to Washington. By the way, Glacier National Park, if you haven't been, you must go. It is awesome. I think it's what God intended. Drove over to Washington, met up with my old group commander, Mike O'Connor. He let me crash at his house, and we got really drunk on some really good scotch. And then I went to Crater Lake National Park, visited my buddy Andy Hogue, who you know very well.
Andy, yeah.
And he and I got really drunk together, and then we did some hiking to waterfalls. Then I went down to California, to the Redwoods, hiked the Boy Scout Trail there. But really, I just wanted to create some memories that were of me. And I had tremendous experiences. I met this incredibly nice couple in Wyoming that they had turned their detached garage into a mother-in-law suite, but she never moved in. So they decided to do Airbnb with it. And so I'm talking to the husband. Next thing I know, we're sharing a few drinks in their backyard, talking about their horses. And they were just the nicest people. As a matter of fact, when I left, they sent me a message that said, if you're ever back in town, let us know. Next day's on us. Yeah, Mike O'Connor was awesome. Andy was awesome. I stayed at this cabin. It was a big house, but it was like a log cabin house in California. And there's an Asian lady that owned it. She didn't speak hardly any English. And when I walked up on the porch, there were all these shoes. Like literally there was like 40 or 50 shoes. And like most of them didn't have a match. So I'm like, where's the feet for these shoes? So so you had to take your shoes off before you went in the house. And so I actually texted my kids, I love you, I've enjoyed being your father. If you don't hear from me, it's because somebody ate me in California. And then I forgot my shoes. I was like, that's what happened to all these shoes. Yeah, man, I met interesting people. And then while I was driving up to Montana, I was out in the middle of nowhere, and I started talking to Judy, and out loud. And I just told her I couldn't hurt like that anymore.
Mm.
That it was killing me.
Yeah.
And that I missed her, but I had to figure out a way to live life without her, and that I would never forget her. And that started it. And after that, for the rest of the trip, when I saw things that I knew she would enjoy, it didn't make me sad. I actually felt like she was with me a little bit. And sometimes I would actually say things out loud.
Yeah.
You know, because I think she could hear me. And that really started where I started re-engineering life.
Yeah. So that was kind of the line in the sand to a little bit of closure, you know.
Yeah.
Kind of your decision to start living your life again.
Yeah. But the process is that, you know,
so what
you
was
backtrack
it?
to.
What do you think did it for you? Like if somebody's like, hey Kevin, how do you get over this? What do you think did it? You know, I talked to a lot of people. Some people, you know, was it the people on your trip? Was it the going out making memories? Was it just getting to a point to where you were like, hey, I have to move on? What helped you make that decision?
It was a couple things. For one, the pain was so great, I had to do something.
Yeah.
I had to. Just to try to describe the feeling of loss, I don't know that I can articulate it. But then two, Judy didn't want to die. If she was still alive, she would, knowing, like if the situation was reversed, she would have wanted me to live a full life.
Yeah.
And to not be able to see me do that would have killed her. Well, she wanted to live a full life. I had a responsibility to not waste mine. She would have kicked my ass to waste my life. And so I didn't know how to really, I was just making it up as I went, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't really know how to get restarted, but I knew that I had to figure out a way. So I just started trying stuff, you know, seeing if it did me any good. Big shout out to a grief counselor. I went to a grief counselor, and he actually informed me about the process of grieving, and just the knowledge that how I felt was normal and why it was normal helped me out a whole lot as well.
Okay, so you did go, you did seek out and talk to somebody kind of professionally. It's you know, in fact, I told you this, but you know, the kind of reason I do this, you know, a lot of people come in like, you know, and I spend a lot of hours in an office talking to people on a couch and, you know, telling me about their mom and that kind of stuff, you know, or going through marriage counseling, but it's not for everybody, you know. No. It's a lot of people heal in a lot of different ways. Therapy is a general term, you know, and a lot of people find that in different things. So I always like to talk to people who've been through difficult and dark situations, and you know, what is it that got them through? It sounds like you kind of had a mix of both, really. You know,
I did. I only did 2 sessions with him, but
really?
Yeah. But
maybe he's really good at
it. Yeah, it wasn't because I didn't like the guy. It's just I actually felt different. Yeah. And so
it's not like you were in a different mindset even going into it. Like you'd kind of come through an epiphany, a realization of like moving forward, and then just kind of got the help afterwards. I mean, maybe I don't mean to assume.
No, that's actually that's actually fairly accurate. What's difficult is the quiet times. You know, the quiet times. For so long, so I didn't sleep in my bed for about 3 months after Judy died. Just didn't feel right. Then after I did start sleeping in the bed, I would throw my arm over, you know, because I just like to be able to touch her, and I would feel her absence, you know, not being able to touch her, and I missed her really, really badly. And so those quiet times when you don't have those distractions, those were really, really hard.
Yeah.
And it takes time. And you can't replace time. You can't speed up time, and you can't recover it. But time is necessary.
Yeah. Was there a period, hearing you tell the story, it seems like pretty quickly you kind of made this decision. Was there a period of not healing, of not moving forward before you got to this? Like, how long did that? Did you have a dark period? I guess.
Oh yeah, man. I drank.
Okay.
I drank rum for about 3 months.
Yeah. Okay.
Every day. I didn't think I was drinking that much, but I was.
Yeah.
Lost about 20 pounds doing that. Weight loss program for champions, right there.
Maybe you can market that. Like the grief diet.
And honestly, man, even after I made that decision, I still struggled.
Yeah.
We had a resiliency day in January of 19. I think it was January. And I was going through, this is after I had seen the grief counselor, after I'd taken my trip. And I was not in a good place. And so here I was, the squadron chief. Actually, I was not quite the squadron chief yet. I was the AMU chief. And I asked the commander, I said, because the Air Force had a rash of suicides at the time. And I asked the commander, I said, sir, I want to talk to the airmen. And so we all came in civilian clothes because we wanted people to see each other as people, not just our stripes and our positions. And I stood up there at the podium and I addressed my airmen. I told them the entire story. I told them how whenever there were many days after Judy died that I didn't want to commit suicide, but I was 100% good with not waking up.
Yeah.
I would never have committed suicide because it would have hurt my kids so much. But I did. I did kind of hope to die so that I could be with Judy. And just the process of being able to voice those things to my people. And there's a risk, when you're in a leadership position, there's a risk that some people might view you as weak. Well, I had an advantage in that I was so exhausted that I didn't care. I just figured, what the hell,
Yeah.
But the action of being able to voice that, and voice how I felt, and voice my pain, it did a couple of things. For one, I didn't have to hide anything. I didn't have to hide anything ever again. It was all out in the open. And two, it actually connected me to my people in a way that was different than what it was before. I like to think that I was a good chief. I cared about my people and always tried to do the right thing by them. But that was different.
Yeah.
Because they saw that if me, the person that's supposed to have it all together, the person that you were supposed to aspire to become, if I had these thoughts, and I was able to work my way through them, maybe there's an opportunity for them to get through theirs.
Yeah.
And that's really what I wanted to achieve, was just show them that life is better because everybody has a Judy. Whether it's an actual person, whether it's a situation, it can be any number of things. Everybody has something that rocks them to their core at some time in their life. And I am no better than anybody else. But how you get through that dictates so much for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Because I do think that you can choose to stay in that dark place and never get over it.
Absolutely, you can.
Or you can recognize that I was lucky. There are people that live 70, 80 years and never find what I found with Judy. They never do. They might try 5 or 6 times, end up paying a lot of alimony. And Judy and I weren't perfect. We had our problems for sure. A lot of it was because of me. But I was lucky because I got to experience that. And some people just never do. And so I needed to count my blessings because I got to experience a thing that some people never get. And the real tragedy would have been had I never found it. And so I'm lucky.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's not like you kind of you were able to frame a lot of things positively, like you made that choice kind of early on in your, well, I don't know about early on, but at some point in there you kind of drew a line and started to focus on, hey, I got to move forward and keeping the positive things and not wallowing in that darkness and in that sorrow, you know. And so man, something I have found, there's a common thread in everybody I've talked to that has come through a really bad situation and come out on the other side, you know, to a point to where it's like, hey, let's, you know, tell me what you did, where, you know, they move past it. No matter what it is, it's a trip. I did this, I did that. Most of the people that I've interviewed on here so far have been like, you know, through my jiu-jitsu gym, you know, and they all, oh, I found this martial art, or I found this, or I started to compete. But it always has a common thread of, but there was all these people involved. There was this support cast. There was, you know, you mentioned, I heard you say, you know, you had some great airmen. You know, there was people, you went across the country and met these people that were kind of a support system and really good. And the more and more I've done this, the more I've realized just how relational people are and how much we can prop each other up, how much we need each other, how much you can mean to someone else by, you know, your story that you told, you know, that you said it in front of the airmen about being honest and what you had been through. You know, I was thinking like, well, at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about all those guys when we were 20 that did that for us, you know, that probably a lot of them don't even know that they were that, you know, that they don't know where I'm at today or know that they were even, that I still think about them sometimes, you know. It's kind of ironic, or that, you know, now you're that up in front of these people.
Well, you know, I think we're communal and we forget that.
Yeah.
You know, some people like to put on a tough face and say, I don't need anybody. That's bullshit.
Yeah, it is.
We all need somebody.
Yeah.
You know, some people like attention more than others, but all of us need somebody. And then, look, if I could give anybody advice, you have to make a decision. Inactivity is your enemy, whether it be mental or physical. But you have to make a decision at some point, and you're going to decide to either wallow in your grief or you're going to decide to live. You will make that decision, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
And whether you're cognizant of it or not. Be aware of it and be active in making your decision, and you have a better outcome. And then you have to try. And you're going to fail. And you have to accept the failure and try again. You know, 325 batting average gets you in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a good point. 1 in 3. That's an F.
That's not good. I didn't realize that.
Well, man, you know, I'm glad to, you know, have caught up with you and hear your story and how it's come around. I mean, it's inspirational for sure, you know, and I know that life has steadily gotten better, you know, over the last couple of years. I know that there's still you never get past something like that. It never goes away. You never, I think, move past it, but you can move from it.
Yeah, you don't. But here's the awesome part. Once you make that decision to live, you open yourself up to possibility.
Yeah.
So now I have this beautiful woman. Her name's Ophelia Romero. We actually met through an app, which
you're gonna date yourself. You
really
start talking about this.
Yeah, I know. Start saying stuff like the Walmarts and the internets.
Swipe right. Yeah. Yeah.
But we met through an app, and she's an incredibly compassionate, kind, and loving woman, and we're getting married in April. And so there is another example of how I'm lucky. You know, lightning strikes twice, right? And it's not going to be the same as it was with Judy. As a matter of fact, I told her she's lucky because I was really screwed up when I was with Judy, so she's getting the refined.
You get you get a much better version, 2.0.
But the reason I say that, man, and I just want to say this real quick. For people in leadership positions, they all too often feel like they have to be a thing. They have to be this predefined, life-size replica of an idea. And if you adhere to that and you end up striving to become that, then that's what you end up becoming, and you end up disregarding all those other aspects of yourself. And then whenever the hard stuff hits you, you don't cope with it well. You don't, because it doesn't fit into the left and right parameters of what that role and position are. And you gotta be human. You gotta be human. It doesn't mean you disregard your responsibilities or anything like that. But what it means is you have to find a way to be something other than that predefined role, to be true to yourself. I found out that I didn't know what I liked, but I remember having to go find shoes. I had to go shop for my own shoes for the first time. For the whole previous portion of my life, I would tell Judy, hey, I need some shoes. She'd be like, okay, we'll go get you some shoes this weekend. And she would take me somewhere and, hey, they'd have shoes, and I'd get shoes, right? I didn't have that anymore. I asked her, hey, what are we doing this weekend? And actually, I didn't forget my shoes. But I would ask her, what are we doing this weekend? And literally, she would decide what we were doing that weekend. So I actually had to start doing these things for myself. And so, hey, husbands, if you think you're tough, man, you rely on your wife a lot more than you think you do. So say thank you. I had to figure these things out on my own. I had to figure out what I liked. And that's still something that I'm actually dealing with, is I still don't have a good definition of what I like to do. My behavioral characteristics are to be a supporter. You know, I'm involved with my kids, try to stay involved with my kids, even though they got their own lives and stuff. Now that I'm retired, I found out I miss the leadership part. I really miss it. Even though some of the stuff you dealt with was the dumbest shit ever, I do miss young guys coming to me, hey, Chief, I got a problem, I need some help. I miss that part. I don't miss being in the Air Force, but I miss that.
Me neither.
But yeah, man, if you're a leader, pay attention to your human side, because life will smack you.
Yeah. And
you need to react to that.
Self-care, man. It's easy to burn out. It's easy to get, I've heard the term compassion fatigue. It sounds so technical, but it's, at some point you just get tired. It's like, I got nothing left. There's nothing in the gas tank. You're depleted. You don't have any, being in a leadership position. If you're not taking care of yourself, you've got nothing to give other people. It's any relationship. It's a marriage. It's a leader. It's whatever. If you're not healthy, you're not giving to the relationship, And
what happens is if you're not paying attention to your personal mental health or spiritual health, you end up using the good parts of you at work.
Yep. Yeah.
And then the good parts of you, there's none of it left when you go home, and it's destructive to your personal relationships.
Yeah. Man, I talk to a ton of people have this conversation way too much, with a lot of people that haven't figured that out. So, man, I really appreciate you coming in and being open to telling that story. And, hopefully there's somebody out there listening, all 12 of my followers, including my mom. So hopefully this will get spread, and
Of course, Mom.
somebody that'll so somebody might be in the same position or dealing with their Judy situation right now that maybe find some hope and some hope in what they're going through.
Happiness can happen again.
Yeah.
It won't necessarily be what it was, but it'll be something new, and you can be happy.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on retirement.
Thank you, man.
Congratulations on getting married in April.
Yep, April 17th.
Yep, and on to the next man. You're retired. The next big chapter. The next grand thing. So, man, I can't wait to hear what it is.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about it either.